Well, my name is Patrick Cleary Burns. I'm a member of the APP now, and I am the MC tonight. This event is sponsored by the Association of Pittsburgh Priests. The topic is Hearing the Forgotten Voice of the Christians in the Holy Land. The speaker is Sir Jeffrey Abood. He's the chair of the Catholic Advisory Council of Churches in the Middle East.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lila Richards, and I'm pleased and honored to welcome Sir Jeffrey Abood this evening. Joyce has provided such a detailed list of Jeff's many accomplishments and attainments that my introduction will be brief and a bit personal. I share Jeff's attachment to Gaza because I worked as the medical director at Al Ahli Hospital during the first Intifada in 1988 and 89. Al Ahli Hospital was over 100 years old and served the people of southern Palestine since the days of the Ottoman Empire. When I was working there, Al Ahli had a staff of both Christians and Muslims, as well as an interfaith staff of international physicians. Sir Jeffrey, or Jeff, has visited Gaza several times over the years, I know, and with the bishop, and is still in regular communication with people on the ground in Gaza, as well as the church and the patriarchate. I look forward to hearing Jeff's update because there's very little news about the Christian community in Gaza and the condition of the churches in Palestine. Thank you.
Well, thanks to the Association of Pittsburgh Priests for having me tonight. It's a good time because it's Advent, so a lot of people's attention turns to the Holy Land. And generally, when we speak about the Holy Land, we're talking about Israel here in the center and the Palestinian territories being the West Bank on the right side of that map and the Gaza Strip that Lila had mentioned on the left side there. And we call this the forgotten voice of the Christians there because when most people think of the Holy Land, they think it's just Jews and Muslims. And while they're, of course, the majority, there's a very vibrant Catholic community there and a larger Christian community in all those areas. So we're going to talk a little bit about them tonight. We're going to share some of the challenges they face, and then we'll share some updates and things on what's happening with the church and stuff in Gaza. Now, in the Holy Land, it's the Mother Church. It's the first church, the church in Jerusalem, and the Latin Patriarchate there. He's head of the Catholic Church there. The Catholics are called the Latins because, they spoke Latin back in the day. And the Patriarch is Cardinal Pizzaballa. He's the current Patriarch of Jerusalem, and he answers to the Patriarch of Rome, of course, Pope Leo. Now, the Christian communities there, whether they live in Israel, they live in the West Bank, they live in Gaza, they go back over 2,000 years. In fact, the Arab Christians were present at the first Pentecost in Acts 2:11. They're one of the ethnic groups listed there. And today's Palestinian Christians are their descendants. And not only have they given us a 2,000-year unbroken witness in the Holy Land and maintained the holy sites, but today they also keep the fruits of the sacraments alive in the place where they all started. Now, ethnically, the permanent Christian communities there are almost all Palestinian. Again, they live in Israel, they live in the West Bank, they live in Gaza. But many of the cities we associate with early Christianity, like the old city in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Jericho, these are situated in today's Palestinian areas. And the Christians there are very much part of the communities in which they live. These are some of the Christians in Gaza. They always have great food, or they did. This is Caritas Baby Hospital in Bethlehem. This is one of the big Catholic hospital there. This, I think, is where Jesus would have gone had he been able to go to a hospital to be born. This probably would have been the place. This is the seminary in Bet Jala, also in the West Bank. These are some of the seminarians and some of the work we support. The different religious orders are there. They have a very vital presence there. In fact, even though the Christians in the Holy Land are less than 2% of the population, in some of the areas, in the Palestinian areas, we provide over 45% of all the health, education, and social services. So we have a huge work and a huge ministry there. This is Bethlehem University. It's the Vatican's university in the West Bank. These are some of the graduates. And these are some of the Christians there. These are some of the Christians in Gaza. I've taken some of these pictures on different trips there. And I like to say they're not just Christian, but they're proudly Christian. They don't hide it, and they're very, very proud of it. Now, on the USCCB website, they say the Palestinian Christian presence in the Holy Land is part of the church's historic Christian witness to the gospel. And they also say by experiencing the local church's travails, of which they experience many, pilgrims can share in the wider struggle for justice and peace, and also can strengthen the bonds of solidarity between the church in the U.S. and in the Holy Land. And we hope this is something that talks like this will help people get appreciation for, is helping them in their struggle for justice and peace, and help strengthening the bonds of solidarity. Because they very much live the way of the cross. This is from Gaza. And they live the way of the cross. In fact, it's gone, the Christian population there has gone from historically about 18% to probably just under 1.5% today. And why is this? Well, the Custos of the Holy Land, who's the head Franciscan there, Franciscans have been there 800 years. They maintain the holy sites. He said Christians have been driven from the Holy Land in overwhelming numbers, and he asks us to help halt and reverse this elimination of the Christian presence in the Holy Land. The heads of all the churches in Jerusalem came out and they said, we, the heads of churches in charge of the sepulchre, which is where Jesus was buried, in Jerusalem, are following with great concern the systematic campaign against the churches and the Christian communities in the Holy Land. The Greek Patriarch says the same thing. Our presence in Jerusalem is under threat. The Assembly of Catholic Ordinaries in the Holy Land says we find ourselves once again dealing with an attempt by Israeli authorities to drive the Christian presence out of the Holy Land. So these are pretty much all the heads of all the churches. And they came out with a statement a number of years ago. And they said, well, why is this? What is this systematic campaign? What is this pressure to drive the people out? And they came out with this statement. And they say that occupation remains the root cause of the conflict and the continued suffering in the Holy Land. Now, this, of course, is nothing new to the Holy Land, unfortunately. It was the Romans in Jesus's time. It's been the Turks and the British. Today, it's the Israelis. And since we do talk about Israel some, we want to be clear from the beginning that there's a difference between the Jewish people and the state of Israel. In fact, the Vatican has always been clear to differentiate this. And they say, in the gifts of calling of God are irrevocable. They say the existence of the state of Israel should be envisioned not in a perspective which is religious, but in reference to the common principles of international law. On the one hand, we have our interfaith relations with Jews and the Jewish community. And on the other hand, we have our political relations with the state of Israel and its policies on the other. And we want to make sure we don't confuse those two, because we don't want to inadvertently step into anti-Semitism, which is, of course, wrong, because anti-Semitism, like Islamophobia or racism, all devalues the image of God in the person. So this is something we want to be clear to differentiate between. So what's happened as the people have been driven out of areas? On the left is what Palestine was in 1946. The next map is when the UN decided to divide up into the modern state of Israel and the Palestinian areas. And then on the right, giving more and more of the closures and restrictions and difficulties placed on the people, these areas have gotten broken up more and more and become essentially anymore like reservations, like we did with the Native Americans. To give you an idea of the population density, on the map on the left, there were probably about 1.5 million people. On the one on the right in the orange areas, there's about 5 million people. So people are condensed more and more with less and less resources. And we'll look a little bit about that. One of the ways this is done is with this, you've heard of annexation or apartheid or security barrier, security fence. These are all terms that have been used to describe these walls that have been built not between Israelis and Palestinians, but around Palestinians. In fact, I took this picture. This is the main entrance when you go from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. You can see the wall, how it snakes around the city. It goes up on the right side of that picture, just under that tree line and on around.
Wow.
And it's the first time in history that Bethlehem and Jerusalem have been separated. This is what it looks like inside Bethlehem. This is not far from the Church in the Nativity where Jesus was born. These are some of the other pictures. To get in and out of the city, you need Israeli permission. Being the occupying power, they have control over who and what gets in and out. This is, on the left, is a home of a Christian family that I've stayed with a few times when I've been in Bethlehem. On the right is that wall around East Jerusalem. This is Our Lady of Sorrows home for the elderly that we support, but this wall cuts people off from their families, from medical care, from a lot of different things. This is Caritas Baby Hospital. It's the main pediatric hospital, and the wall is right outside. This is taken, I took this from the parking lot. The wall, and what it does is it makes difficulties for staff to get there, or patients to get there, or supplies to get there. Pope Francis stopped there and prayed when he was there on his trip. And the movement in and out of these walls, in and out of these closed areas, are controlled by these checkpoints. These are some of them. This is the main one leaving Bethlehem and to leave Bethlehem. These are guys or people in general going to medical appointments or to school or to work. It's all controlled by the soldiers who are in the gates there. These are just some in the right now. For the last 20 years or so, it's always ranged between maybe 400 and 800 checkpoints in an area about the size of Northeast Ohio. This is the West Bank. And lately, that's been increased to about 1,200 of these checkpoints as of about 2 weeks ago when I spoke with a colleague in Bethlehem. And kids have to do this on the way to school. Sometimes they're built around neighborhoods. In fact, getting to church is one of the difficulties of things. And one of the Christians there said, worshiping is almost an act of defiance. We fight to reach our churches to keep them alive. We want to keep them living. And in fact, the Palestinian Christians there are often called the living stones because they're the living part of the church in the Holy Land. One of the bright spots is some of the Jewish groups that advocate on behalf of peace and justice issues. Maxim Watch is basically old Jewish grandmothers who advocate for people to be able to get through these checkpoints and in and out of these walls and get to their medical care and get to their schools. These are some of the organizations there. You can find them online. One of the other things that is controlled tightly in an occupied territory is these are different military orders. The top one sums it all up. It says all water resources are Israeli state property. One of the things a number of years ago we tried to do with the bishop in Cleveland at the time was do a project there. And he said, we'll see what they need. So they needed water wells. So we said, okay. We talked to Caritas and they said, okay, this is what it's going to cost. So we got back to them. In about 2 weeks, and we said, okay, we have the money. Let's go ahead and dig the wells. And they said, well, the Israelis won't give us permission. And we said, but it's in Gaza. And they're like, it doesn't matter. They control the water. So we didn't dig the wells, even though we had the money, which is usually the hard part, right? When one party controls all the water, you can see how that water is distributed. This is the World Health Organization's. The red line is the minimum standard of water to maintain a healthy population. And you can see how that is distributed on a chart. This is how it's distributed in real life. In the front is an Israeli settlement. You'll notice how green and vibrant it is. And behind it is a Palestinian town. And you can see how dry and brown everything is because they just don't have access to the water. In fact, they have to put water tanks on the top of their homes to collect what water they can, or sometimes to buy it at overinflated prices. Sometimes they'll dig cisterns like they used to have in the Old Testament. So that's some of the things, some of the characteristics of the occupied areas and why people are being driven out. What about the Catholic Church itself as an institution? Well, in 1993, the fundamental agreement was signed between the Holy See and the State of Israel. It established diplomatic relations and outlined the property rights and tax exemptions for the Catholic Church in Israel. And this was signed by both. It was enacted by the Vatican, and they began formal diplomatic relations with the State of Israel. And it was not enacted by the Israeli government to this day. So at this point, the rights and the tax exemptions of the Catholic Church are not guaranteed. So this is something that makes the institution kind of on shaky ground there. Imagine how much more so the people that don't have the backing of an institution. So tax exempt status and ownership. So in 2018, you may or may not remember, they closed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And it was on TV. It was presented like tourists going there and being disappointed they couldn't get in, which I understand that. But the reason it was closed, the first time I believe it was ever closed for 3 days, was these attempts to remove the tax exempt status of the church. And they came out, all the heads of all the churches, and they said, we're in charge of the Holy Sepulchre. We're following with great concern the systematic campaign against the churches and the Christian community in the Holy Land. Recently, this has reached an unprecedented level as the Jerusalem municipality issued orders of seizure of church assets, properties, and bank accounts in what seems as an attempt to weaken the Christian presence in Jerusalem. The systematic campaign of abuse against churches and Christians reaches its peak as a discriminatory and racist bill that targets only the properties of the Christian community. The Jewish and the Muslim communities, this would have not applied to. Now, there was enough worldwide pressure at the time to make them back off, but those attempts continue today. In fact, the Armenians there are facing a lot of difficulty with being in Jerusalem at this point. Right now, the Israeli Park Authority is trying to nationalize a big chunk of the Mount of Olives. This would affect over 20 churches and Christian sites. Without any consent or anything of the churches, it would just confiscate the land and nationalize it to make a park. Christian communities are facing more and more violence from settlers. In fact, just in August, the Council of Patriarchs and Head of Churches went to Taipei, which is the last 100% Christian village in the West Bank. They're in different villages, but this is the 100% Christian one. They went in solidarity with the local community following an intensifying trend of systematic and targeted attacks against them and their presence. So they're basically pogroms. These settlers come in, they burn cars, they do graffiti, they destroy things. This was the Latrun Monastery a few years ago in Jerusalem. There's the multiplication of the church in loaves and fishes a few years ago. Christian cemeteries are regularly desecrated. In fact, the Assembly of Catholic Ordinaries They came out and they said, "It is with regret and anger we see ourselves condemning such criminal acts, which have been repeated many times, while we see no attempt to stop this by the state authorities, especially while top officials claim as if Christians are doing very well in it." You'll hear politicians say, "Oh, the Christians have it great here." The Christians themselves, of course, have something else to say. And that's why we always encourage people, if you go on a pilgrimage, to be able to go on one that actually meets with the Christians there, because you'll get a different perspective than you will on just kind of a standard tourist kind of thing. Freedom of religion is becoming increasingly compromised. This is the stone of anointing in the Holy Sepulchre where Jesus' body was anointed. It was closed one day, citing security concerns. But again, the heads of the churches came out and said, there's no security concerns. This isn't it. Up to this past year, they will keep people out of the churches. On the right was the Apostolic Nuncio on Holy Saturday this year, kept out from going into the Holy Sepulchre to celebrate. So the second part of this, I kind of would like to share more about Gaza and the church. Now, the church's kind of presence there goes back all the way to the Holy Family's flight to Egypt. Gaza would have been the main thoroughfare they would have gone through, and it's traditionally held that they stayed there in Gaza at the site of what is today St. Papyrus Church in Gaza, which I'll show you in a little bit here. So the church has had a presence there, for 2,000 years. So just about Gaza, to give you an idea of its size, this is a map of Ireland. That little oval on the right would be Gaza compared to Ireland. So you can see it's very small. It's only about 26 miles long. It's about 4 miles or 6 miles wide, I think, at the widest. This is what it looks like. This is prior to October 7th of 2023. As I showed you some of those walls before, these are all around the Gaza Strip. They're guard towers, and I'll show you photographs of this. But there are 2.2 million people, or there were. This is one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. This is what the wall looks like. Again, this is before October 23, when these are automated gun turrets. This was one of the two entrances in. This is what it looks like on the inside for the people living there. But as I said, the Christians are very much a part of the communities in which they live. These are some of the Christians in Gaza. They're out in the communities. This I thought was great because it was one of the families that built something out of essentially junk for their kids to have fun, because it's very third world. It was very common to see donkeys and stuff instead of cars. But the church is there. They're in the communities. They're doing the ministries, giving them. The Missionaries of Charity is one of the orders there, Mother Teresa's order. They have a home where they take care, as you can see, severely handicapped kids. And please remember their faces, because these are some of the people that are still there today, living in some of the conditions which I'll share with you soon here. Prior, again, to the most recent conflict, the Dominicans were helping rebuild a structure around some 3rd century Christian mosaics that they had found. So they were in the process of restoring that. St. Thomas Aquinas Center in Gaza, that's a Catholic ministry that teaches young people job skills, computer skills, English skills, things that, even though they're locked in this concentration camp, they still can access the outside world through things like the internet and that kind of thing. So this was one of the English classes I helped with one night. Again, prior to October 23, this was Holy Family. This was one of the summer camps we support. They had about 200 kids. They will get to spend a whole month. It's a positive outlet for their stress and anxiety. They build solidarity between, and these are a good mix of Christian and Muslim kids. They're all in this together. You can see a lot of kids. In fact, Gaza, while it's 2.2 million people, over 50% of it is children. So when you hear the casualty figures and all that, that's a population that's over half children. I just want you to be aware of that. Again, some of the young people are very involved there. They very much contribute to the works of the church. And as it's been in the news the last 2 years, the priest there, Father Yusuf, he said, if Gaza's not hell on earth, it's only because Christ is present still. So the latest UN statistics, there's been 70,000 people killed, of which 70% are women and children. There's another 20,000 children missing, and over 17,000 have been orphaned. And it currently has the largest concentration of child amputees in the world. This is Gaza City. This is before the war began in October. This is Gaza City now. This was 1 million people when they were trying to return to Gaza City with the recent, quote, ceasefire. This is Jabalia. This is the biggest city in the north. This is Jabalia now. This is Rafah. This is the biggest city in the south. This is Rafah now. This is Holy Family Church. This is the third time it was attacked by the IDF. They said, oh, it was our mistake. We didn't mean to do that. Problem is, that was the same excuse they gave the first 2 times they attacked the Holy Family Church there. This was the first time when they destroyed all the solar panels and water tanks. The second time they sniped into the church and killed a few people and wounded others, Israeli snipers. And the patriarch came out and said this. I mean, this is not me throwing conjecture out there. This was Sacred Heart School in Gaza. This is it now. Above is the newly finished Cultural Orthodox Center. Below is it now. Access to food. So 2 million people are at risk of starvation. The Israeli armies destroyed the fields, the mills, the bakeries, the fishing boats. They continue, despite the ceasefire, to blockade. And often the convoys, once they're in, get bombed. This is a recent map with the ceasefire in place. Beyond the yellow line, this is the new border. So south of that line is where the Israelis have withdrawn to, and concentrated, even though it's concentrated and as dense as the population was before, they're all having to live within the blue line now. So it's even a lot less feasible for people to live there. And also everything south of this red line on the new Israeli side just happens to be all the agricultural for the strip. So they control all the food resources. What was left? Okay. And it's interesting because Pope Leo in June came out and said, we are witnessing the iniquitous use of hunger as a weapon of war. Starving people to death is a very cheap way of waging war. And it's interesting because there are international criminal court warrants out for the arrest of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense of Israel for using starvation as a weapon of war. These were some of the aid trucks lined up outside Gaza. that were denied for months to be able to get in. Recently, with the ceasefire, I think they've been allowing in less than 100 trucks a day. The minimum needed for the World Health Organization and the UN, the minimum needed was 500 to 600 trucks a day. So at least people are maybe getting a meal now instead of no meal. And as the Cardinal Patriarch Pizzaballa says, he said, Christ is not absent from Gaza. He's there. He's crucified and the wounded. He's buried under the rubble, and yet present in every act of mercy, every candle in the darkness, every hand extended to the suffering. Pope Francis was one of those hands. He called the parish Holy Family. He called them in Gaza every night up until just before he passed. And when he did pass, he left the Pope Mobile to be converted into a mobile health clinic for the children in Gaza. The Israelis haven't let it in yet, but hopefully they will. And the church is being present. So when I was in Gaza last at the church at Holy Family, there's some convents there. There were 4 orders. There was the Institute of the Incarnate Word, was the priests, the Rosary Sisters, the Missionaries of Charity, the Daughters of Charity. There might have been another one. Anyway, most of them have foreign passports because they come from, worldwide. So there have been different opportunities for them to get out, and they've been told to get out. And of all those orders, the ones that have left have been none. They've all stayed. And I want to read just something very briefly. This was from one of the sisters there, because as we talked about food, they said, sometimes some generous and courageous people bring something for us to eat. Whatever we see from outside, first we serve the residents, the children that I asked you to remember their faces earlier on. If there's anything left, then we eat. Sometimes we get just one meal a day. Most of the time, it's just one meal a day. One day, we had just a loaf of bread shared among the 3 of us. The other day, it was an orange, and the 3 sisters shared it among them. So they stay not without personal cost to them. The Catholic Church sometimes gets a bad rap, but their work here and their presence is something we can be proud of, for sure. The church has acted as a refugee camp for the last 2 years. There's 500 to 600 people living here. This is the school. This is inside the school. All the classrooms is housing now for the people living there. They're out in their communities doing what they can to help. Just recently, the school there at Holy Family, in a makeshift shelter, they're trying to restart classes because these kids have been out of school for the last 2 years. So they're doing what they can to try and get things as normal as they can for these kids. This is inside the school. They're trying to get them back into education because you can't miss education. And they're doing everything they can. This was the youth room. Yeah, I don't know what to say. So if Christ is present there, there's hope, of course. And they all live in a land, and they'll tell you this, it's experienced resurrection. And because of that, there's a way to move forward. Now the assembly, this is the end here, the Assembly of Catholic Ordinaries of the Holy Land, they said, how do we move forward? We promote a vision according to which everyone in the Holy Land has full equality. The equality benefiting all men and women, created equal in God's own image and likeness. We believe that equality, whatever political solutions might be adopted, is a fundamental condition for a just and lasting peace. We lived together in this land in the past. Why should we not live together in the future too? This is our vision for Jerusalem and the whole land, called Israel and Palestine, between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. And the challenge to this is in 2018, the Israeli government passed their nation state law that provides full citizenship and rights only for its Jewish citizens. So this is difficult. And the patriarch came out and he said, this enacted law is a cause of great concern because it defines Israel as the nation state of only the Jewish people. The law does not provide any constitutional guarantees for the right of indigenous and other minorities, of which Christians are one. The law says that there are not equal rights between Jews and Arabs and refuses to acknowledge their existence. The Christian citizens of Israel have the same concerns as any other non-Jewish communities. And equality is the first step because there's a process here, and this process works. And maybe in the Q&A, this will come up. But when we have equality, when we see each side as being a person and having equal rights and value as each of us, then it can lead to justice, where we actually start treating each other that way. And then once we see each other that way, once we treat each other that way, we can put the mechanisms in place to ensure that that continues, that peace is built, hopefully getting to the point one day of reconciliation. And finally, last slide. Thank you for your patience. There's a number of ways we can support the backbone of the church. And there's 4 ways. This is the USCCB recommendations and the Patriarchate. Prayer, because everything is based in prayer, and it's the one kind of aid we know will get there. Projects, there are all kinds of projects you can support. Catholic Relief Services has them, the Franciscans have them, the Catholic Near East Welfare Association has them. You can get online and find things. Pilgrimage, again, when they do start really going in force again, we'd ask you to make sure your pilgrimage includes meeting with the Christians living there, so you get an accurate view. And finally, persuasion. I work with Churches for Middle East Peace, cmep.org. They work on advocacy issues with the government on how to promote the political and socioeconomic changes that will help Christians and all people to stay in the Holy Land. So you can get on there and learn more about them if you want. That's my email in case anybody would wish to contact me afterwards. And I'm done. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sir Jeffrey. That was a difficult but wonderful presentation.
Is there interference from Hamas to the Christians or generally?
Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you can hear me then. Okay, good. Yeah, so this is interesting. So I've known each of the last 3 priests there. Father Musalem, Father Mario, and Father Romanelli that's there now. And they've all come out publicly and said that Hamas is not the problem. The problem is we're locked into this giant camp and there's no jobs for people. There's no positive future for these people. So a lot of them leave. And I actually asked that question also when I was with some of the youth, the young people that I was teaching and talking with and stuff. And I asked them, and I said, so is there pressure to convert here? Because obviously the Christians are a small minority. It's a majority Muslim population. And they all pretty much told me the same thing. They said, well, they said the pressure isn't external. It's not like people are saying convert or die, like ISIS back in Syria, that kind of thing. They said the pressure's internal. And they said that comes from being a minority Christian, and you grow up and a lot of your friends are Muslim. Maybe the people you're interested in going out with are Muslim. And it makes you ask, why am I Christian? And it makes them explore their faith really deeply, honestly. And you don't get a lot of what we call here, I call Catholics that are just born Catholic and that's it.
Credo Catholics.
That's it, Credo Catholics. You don't get a lot of that. As I showed you with the summer camps and stuff, they're very involved. They're very have a lot of input into the church, and it calls them to explore their faith more. And it also puts a bigger burden on the church because the church has to rise to the occasion also. And they have to engage these young people and keep their interest and let them explore their faith and give them opportunities. So yeah, it's different than the news would make you think. The news makes you think, oh, it's put to the sword kind of thing, but it's not that at all. It's kind of a lived experience in a culture where the Christians are the minority. We don't really have that experience here because as Christians in the U.S., we've always been the majority. But when you're a minority, it's a whole different thing. So I hope that answered your question.
Kathy Nolan, Adrian, you have your hand up?
Yes. I'm curious. Why do we keep talking about a ceasefire when the Israelis have never maintained it, upheld it? Every single day since the very beginning of the ceasefire, they have continued to bomb and kill Palestinian, particularly men, women, and children. They are not abiding by the agreement to allow adequate humanitarian aid to enter. So why do we keep calling it a ceasefire?
I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you, but it does make me think of something, and I just want to share this paragraph really quick. So one of the young people I'm in contact with there almost daily for the last 2 years, and I want to tell you just really quickly about him so you can see where he's coming from when he sent me the message that he sent me. Because as you said, the difficulties haven't stopped. They're still ongoing at a lower scale, but they haven't stopped and made a positive way forward at all, really. But this is a young man. I was friends with his father for years. Anyway, his father was killed. His sister, 13-year-old sister, died from cancer because the Israelis wouldn't let her in and out for treatment for proper cancer because they didn't have the equipment in Gaza. His brother was killed while they were waiting for food to try and get food from one of these aid stations. So his sister, his brother, and his mother's left. And I've supported them in different ways. And like I said, I'm in touch with them almost every day. So one day he sends me, he's 20, 21 now. He sends me this thing and he says, Jeff, he goes, anxiety is taking over the situation. I don't know what the best course of action is at this stage, but there aren't many solutions at my disposal. And of course I said, anyway, I can help. You just need to tell me, my friend. And he says, I want you to be well. He thought of me when he has all that other stuff going on. And that's the quality of the people that are there. And we actually need a legitimate ceasefire. I agree. It needs to actually happen. So that's one of the ways we can continue to advocate for that kind of thing. So hopefully you will.
Thank you.
There's a question from the chat. What are the best organizations operating in the West Bank and Gaza to donate to?
So there's a lot of them. If you want to go through the Catholic Church, and I prefer that because there's transparency along the way, and the money's getting there. Caritas Jerusalem is a good one. Catholic Relief Services is a good one. Catholic Near East Welfare Association, CNEWA, is the papal agency there. They're good. These will actually get the money and get stuff done on the ground. So any of those are good. There's other ones too, but just offhand, those are the ones I can think of.
I wonder if you could comment a little bit, Jeff, about the influence of Christian Zionists, and particularly having Mike Huckabee, an avowed Christian Zionist, as the U.S. ambassador to Israel. I know that some Palestinian Christian leaders have met with him And I think he made some kind of brief statement of disapproval about Israeli treatment of Palestinian Christians. But do you think that his views uh, about the legitimacy of Israel's settlement and his Christian Zionist outlook have changed at all as a result of his being there?
So it's interesting. Politicians are politicians, right? Um, I know when he was there, he visited the village of Taipei, which I showed you a couple pictures from in the presentation, of a car being burnt and something else. 100% Christian village. And he spoke up on that just because it was Christians. But that's about the most positive thing I've seen him do. Um, I would like to talk about, you said Christian Zionists. Archbishop Hanna there, he said something that I think is very much true. He said, there is no such thing. He goes, you can't be Christian and a Zionist, because a Zionist is a violent political ideology, and Christianity is the opposite of that. So you can be one or the other, but you can't be both. So I would say, if he wants to be a Zionist, that's on him, and how he may or may not change, I don't know. I hope he will, but
Another question in the chat is, we have Jewish friends who claim that free Gaza is a ridiculous statement, that the Palestinians freely elected Hamas and Hamas is refusing to negotiate for peace. How can we respond to this in a positive way? Boy, that's
yeah.
a question.
Can you read it again, please?
Yeah, it would be, we have Jewish friends who claim that free Gaza is a ridiculous statement, that the Palestinians freely elected Hamas, and Hamas is refusing to negotiate for peace. How can we respond to this in a positive way?
Yeah. So, yeah, Hamas was elected in free and fair elections back, I don't know, 17 or 18 years ago. President Carter, ex-President Carter at that time, had overseen the elections to make sure they were legit. The Palestinians basically at the time had two choices. Kind of like here, I think we have basically two choices, the Democrats or the Republicans. May not like either one, but those are basically one of those two are going to be in charge. So I think it's similar there in that the Palestinian Authority that had traditionally run it was widely seen, even today is still widely seen as corrupt and not having the interest of the people at heart. And Hamas at the time was big on providing social services and stuff. So they got elected. They have been positive engaging with the peace process. That's obviously half the reason why we have the ceasefire, as flawed as it is, that we have today, obviously, because both sides had to agree to it, right? So I will say there are a lot of great Jewish groups out there in the US and in Israel. I showed you on the slide, some of the ones in Israel that are working for peace and justice, because you have to have justice to get peace. You can't just have it imposed or it's not really going to work. And here in the US, Voice for Peace is a big one. So,
well, Jeffrey just mentioned the Jewish Voice for Peace, and they are the largest anti-Jewish, progressive Jewish, anti-Zionist organization in the world, they say. They've been active in demonstrations in this country for years now. They have a Zoom meeting at 3 o'clock Monday through Friday. They call it the Power Half Hour, and they encourage people to write letters to the editor. They're strongly opposed to the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestine. And they have a lot of credibility because they're Jewish, and they feel that Zionists have co-opted and damaged the Judaism of the prophets that calls for peace and justice. I was happy to hear you mention them because I think they're doing wonderful work. I hope the Catholic bishops can catch up with them one of these days.
Comments from you on that, Sir Jeffrey?
No, I don't have any comments. I think, thanks, Neil. I think Paulette's unmuted now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had trouble getting on. Jeff, thank you so very much. I wanted to choke up all the time as you were talking. You really expressed my experience over there also. I was one of the Christian peacemakers, Christian team peacemakers in Hebron. And that's how I got to know Jeff. But I want to say too that our congressional members, you know, if you have a congressional member who is of the House or the Senate, who is look up that person's record on their stand in Israel and Palestine, because I think like we had two in Ohio, Senator Sherrod Brown and Marcy Kaptur from Toledo, who both were excellent in so many ways, but they would not take a stand on Gaza, you know. And I think that's what's so disappointing about people of faith who just they won't, because they're financed so much by AIPAC, the big lobbying group in the United States. And I think we can pressure, or at least I think that, you know, our government, as much as it is involved, and it is so involved in the Security Council, which basically always votes in favor of Israeli power. The political stuff is so convoluted that contributes to the suffering of the people over there. And I believe that somehow, for myself anyway, to take that kind of a action is really important. And then what do I want to say? I think there's only 7 or 8 or 9 congressional members who are not financed by AIPAC to a great extent. So, and one other little thing is every year Israel finances, in my understanding, 60 of our own Congress people to go to Israel and to hear their story. Besides that, they finance students to come over. And if they want to become citizens of Israel, it takes 2 weeks to become a citizen of Israel. Whereas those who have been expelled are, you know, they are original citizens and they are forbidden to come back. So thank you, Jeff, again. Just thank you for your immense knowledge and the empathy that you have for the Christians over there, which means all people, Christians suffer like the Muslims do.
Yeah. Let me tag on one thing you said, sister, about action. A lot of times people will back off of doing things. Oh, we don't really know what to think, or this is two-sided, or this and that. And they don't do anything. But I want to read this paragraph because this is something Patriarch Pizzaballa came out with a month ago. Well, actually, the last few months. But it's about neutrality. So being neutral in a situation like this. And what he said is, the important thing is to be honest. The church must stand with those who suffer. Always. The church cannot be neutral. I can't go to my parishioners in Gaza who are under bombardment and say we're neutral. I keep being told I need to be neutral. Come with me to Gaza, speak to my people who lost everything, and then tell me I have to be neutral. It doesn't work. However, while it's true that the church cannot be neutral, it's also true that we cannot be part of the conflict. That would not only be wrong, but also foolish in a context where after 76 years of war, the faults of both sides do not cancel each other, but add up. In such a polarized environment, it's not easy to be true, to have the courage to speak a word of truth, and also to know how to express closeness to those who suffer.
Wow.
So that's important to take action, I think, for that reason.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.
There's an interesting question in the chat. Our Jesuit from Arlene and David Christian. Our Jesuit parish, Holy Trinity Church in Washington, D.C., has a brand new sister parish relationship with St. Catherine Parish in Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm.
We are just getting acquainted with them on Zoom and hope to develop the relationship over time. Any advice?
I think that's great. I know a priest in Michigan that's actively trying to promote parish partnerships. So I really commend you guys for doing that. It's such a support to them because, you know, the title of this is The Forgotten Christians. And often they feel abandoned by the Christians in the West because they don't even think there's Christians there. So in reaching out in a concrete way like this, it really helps build momentum and solidarity. And I really thank you guys for doing that. Hopefully more parishes will come on board because, you know, we're one church and they need us. So we need to reach out. So thank you guys for doing that.
And Sister Barbara, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that another Jewish organization, J Street, is Jews who work for peace in Palestine. And I think it's important that we as Christians collaborate with our Jewish friends. And it's very empowering. And there's a local chapter here in Pittsburgh.
Nice.
Okay. One person has a question. Do you live in Palestine?
No, I live in beautiful snowbound Ohio.
Where in Ohio?
Up around Cleveland.
Okay, thank you. Another question from the chat is, why do you believe the U.S. government has insisted on continuing to finance and arm Israel's attack on Gaza? What is the most effective way for us to combat this?
So my suggestion on the second part of that question would be go to Churches for Middle East Peace because they kind of stay on the front line of all the legislative and advocacy stuff. So they'll tell you what bills are coming up, what you can do, who to contact, that kind of thing. That's a good way forward to enact advocacy in a political way. And what was the first part of the question? Do you remember?
I'm looking at, I've lost it. They keep popping
US
up.
government, why the US government is still supporting Israel's arms? Why is the US government still doing that?
I think it's pressure, you know, and I know a lot of people blame AIPAC and the Zionist lobby, which is part of it, but I don't think it's the biggest part of it. I think the biggest part of it and the biggest problem are the Christians that hold to Zionism because they're a very large voting base. They're very vocal. They're very connected into the political scene. And I think the reason it continues is because of that lobby group, the Christian Zionists. Again, Christian and Zionist is not a thing, but for purposes of labeling them, that's what I would say. So I think that's the linchpin in changing that is to help change that community. And lately, I've noticed kind of some hope. What I think is taking root in that is you'll see things that people like Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, conservative figures that are putting out a different thought than they've been used to hearing. So I think that's positive. So hopefully things will change, hopefully sooner rather than later.
So that was my question. So I'm actually going to add one bit to that, which is Christian Zionists that we said kind of that's a bit of an oxymoron, but why do they even have a dog in this fight? What is their underlying motivation? Because understanding that is important for being able to interact and frankly refute.
Yeah. So they hold to an end times theology that the Catholic Church does not uphold upon. And that's that at the end times, all the Jews need to be back in Israel so Jesus can return for his second coming. So they need to support Israel, right or wrong, no matter what happens, to make that happen, as if God needed a hand in helping history to come about. So that's the theology. Obviously, it's a lot more detailed than that. There are different books out there. Don Wagner's a good author that kind of addresses those issues from a theological perspective. But that's kind of, the basic thought behind it.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. I'm Mary Moran. I happen to work with Jeff on the Catholic Advisory Council for Churches for Middle East Peace. I want to give a follow up with what Jeff said. Churches for Middle East Peace is incredibly valuable because they have over 45 religious denominations agreeing on helping people who need help in Gaza. And then the bottom line is to try to keep informed of what's going on because things change every day. I get the Jerusalem Post and the Haaretz News on my cell phone, so I try to keep on top of what's going on. And then the it was mentioned earlier the parish or the parish partnership with Bethlehem through through Holy Family or Holy Trinity in Washington D.C. That is extremely worthwhile, and as far as I know, that's the only parish that I know of that has a sister parish in uh, in in the West Bank, and they do a lot of very positive kinds of things, and they also have a retreat going on. So those of you who are interested, you might want to just go on their website and sign up. Anyway, it's good to be here. I'm glad that you had recorded it because pictures are worth 1,000 words. So.
Well, thank you, Mary. Evelyn, or I guess that's Jim Ruck.
Stronger than individual voices or the institutional voices of the church in this, and in our case, it'd be USCCB. Any suggestions for what either who or how people on this call could make their voices heard in that circle? So that would be part A, and then part B would be any other political action you could suggest.
Yeah, so the USCCB just changed leadership, and their International Peace and Justice Commission just changed leadership too. So we'll wait and see what happens. I don't know what the new direction there will be. We'll just have to wait and see, what's going to happen with that. As far as things you can promote, the Catholic ordinaries of the Holy Land, the Latin Patriarchate, the clergy that actually live there are a great source. You can go to their website or whatever, but you'll get a lot of the stuff that I presented tonight. You'll get that there. So did that answer everything you asked?
It's any suggestions you could have of what else we can do to make the voice heard.
Yeah, and honestly, from what's coming up, as Mary had said, and I hate to keep repeating myself, but I think Churches for Middle East Peace is good for that also. It stays abreast of all that legislative stuff. That's not really my thing. So I kind of pass it off to my betters. So that's the best answer I have for you. I don't know if that works or not. But.
We have 3 people with their hands up, but we have time for one more.
Okay.
So Jim, you were first up.
I'll be so quick. Just for clarification, I love those pictures. The pictures of the schools and the teaching, is that before or after all the destruction?
So the ones with all the kids, like at the summer camp and stuff, that was before. And I've been to a couple of those summer camps during that time because we support it. And then the ones where they're kind of like in the makeshift school, there's a lot less students. Obviously there's a reason there's a lot less students, but
but that is the rebuilding going on.
Afterwards. Yeah, that's the rebuilding going on now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we can hear from Michael Drohan. If you
You're
unmute.
muted, Michael.
Yes. Jeff, thank you very, very much for your wonderful presentation. My estimation about the terrible, terrible situation of genocide in Gaza is that it is underwritten by our government, the US government. And without the US government, it would not continue, in my estimation. What is your opinion on this, and how we can react to how we can cope with our government, who in our name seems to be underwriting the genocide in Gaza?
Yeah, and this is something we have to speak up and continue to speak up for. There's no question it's our political and military and financial resources that keep this going. And we're in a unique position. We're kind of in the belly of the beast. And just like Paul knew when to use his Roman citizenship to advance what he believed in, we can do the same here. But we can't be neutral, as the patriarch says. We have to be active. So whatever we can do to encourage people to do that, we have to do it, and have to do it the way forward.
Good.
And can I say in
thank
closing,
you.
I have a minute? Oh,
Yes, thank you very much. Do you have a moment of closing to share with us?
Well, I do. Michael, is that an Irish accent I'm detecting?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, one of the examples, of how things work and how we can make things good is the Good Friday Agreement that happened in the north of Ireland years back. And it's one of those success stories that show that a peace process, when equality is the beginning block, it's a moral framework, and everybody comes to the table, everybody gets a seat at the table. And that's how you can build on a thing and make something work for a positive future for everybody. And that's something we need here. So I always say you can look to the Irish for a good example. So
this has been a wonderful experience for us. Very difficult, but we thank you very much for your presentation tonight.